guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Yes. You stole the intro.
Yeah, because you always do the intro. I knew you'd be shocked. And welcome back to another awesome episode of It's a Sign.
So what are we talking about on today's episode, huh?
Today we are talking about ancient technology.
Cool.
Yeah. Very cool, huh?
Very cool. Have you ever wondered how those megalithic stone monuments were cut so precisely? Have you ever thought how they were moved? How the ancients seem to possess a technology that surpasses even our own? Well, today we will be diving into those mysteries, diving into the secrets, and trying to extrapolate what it was the ancients were doing and how they did it.
Wow. Yeah, I have some ideas of how they did it.
Some ideas.
It'd be good to just confirm some of those ideas I have.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What are those ideas?
What, you want to know my ideas now? But we were going into the ancients.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll save your ideas. Cause, Let me just take a sip of water before we begin. If anyone's noticed, I have a very cute little plaster on for some reason because my finger won't stop bleeding.
Yeah.
And
the weather is turned very cold here in the south of France suddenly. Which we don't normally get cold weather here, so...
Yeah, it snowed the other day for the first time. But let's jump in because holy crapadoodles, I found so much stuff. It was really hard to limit how much I put into this episode, and I kind of feel like I'll be scrambling a little to fit everything in. But I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to really try and focus on the best things too.
Okay, great.
First thing to start us off, to kind of warm us up, ease us into this topic, is the mystery of the Antikythera mechanism. Have you heard of this mechanism? It was also said to be the first computer ever built. And it was an unusual artifact found in an ancient Greek? In an ancient Greek. Again, I said it again. Why can't I say Greek?
Why are they not called grape?
In an ancient Greek shipwreck. And many of you might have seen this around on the internet, floating around on the internet. And I'd never done a deep dive into it. And recently they've kind of reconstructed it and pieced together what this ancient analog computer did. So, the Antikythera mechanism was found in a Roman-era shipwreck and named after a Greek island. It was located in the Aegean Sea between mainland Greece and Crete. And Antikythera is an island that literally means opposite of Kythera, another much larger island. The ship where this item was found is assumed to be Roman, and when it sank just off the coast of the island in the middle of the 1st century BCE, it carried a huge number of artifacts dating back to as early as the 4th century BC.
Oh, shipwreck.
Shipwreck, baby. So, in 1900s, Greek sponge divers found the shipwreck, which was submerged nearly 150 feet below sea level. While wearing gear that was standard for the early 20th century, canvas suits and copper helmets, when the original diver surfaced with reports of artifacts, horses, and corpses, the captain assumed he had the raptures of the deep, essentially a drunkenness as a result of the nitrogen in the breathing mix piped into the diving helmet. So the captain, when the guy surfaced after discovering this, the guy thought he was drunk with nitrogen because you can get delirious if you have too much nitrogen in your system.
All right.
That's why there's this thing when divers go too deep. It's they can have heavy nitrogen buildup in their lungs, and they can start to lose the plot, and they'll stop paying attention to their life support, and they'll just keep swimming deeper and kill themselves eventually.
Oh God.
So he thought he had the raptures of the deep, which is the nitrogen, or a decompression sickness. But it turned out that the guy was being serious. An astrophysicist at Athens University named Xenophon Moussas theorized in 2006 that the boat on which the mechanism was found may have been headed to Rome as part of a parade for Julius Caesar in the 1st century BC. More recent research, though, suggests that the ship may have been en route to Rome from Turkey, and the ship's path has been difficult to trace because the Aegean was an important and busy shipping area at the time. The Antikythera mechanism's significance wasn't recognized for 75 years. The unique bronze and wood object was found with a shipload of marble, coins, glassware, and pottery in the 1900s. After 2 additional decades of study, the first publication on the Antikythera mechanism was made in 1974 by physicist and historian Derek de Sola Price. But Price's work was unfinished when he died in 1983 without having figured out how the device actually worked. The Antikythera mechanism is currently in 82 pieces, representing about a third of the original structure. In 2021, researchers from University College London made scans of the fragments, analyzed the symbols and inscriptions of the pieces, and compared this body of knowledge to what ancient Greeks would have known about astronomy and time to arrive at a model for how gears of the machine were assembled. The famous marine explorer Jacques Cousteau and his team divided the Antikythera shipwreck in 1976, shortly after Price's primary publication, finding coins from the 1st century BCE and a few smaller bronze pieces of the mechanism. A few years later, noted physicist Richard Feynman visited the National Museum in Athens. Feynman reportedly was terribly unimpressed by the museum as a whole, but wrote that the Antikythera mechanism was so entirely different and strange that it is nearly impossible. It is some kind of machine with gear trains, very much like the inside of a modern wind-up clock. It has been called the first computer, since long before the invention of the digital computer, there have been analog computers. These types of computers range from mechanical aids like a slide rule to a device that can predict the tides. The Antikythera mechanism, which was designed to calculate dates and predict astronomical phenomenon, has therefore been called the earliest analog computer. The Antikythera mechanism was so technologically advanced that nothing surpassed it for close to 1,500 years. It was an anomaly, and nothing like it has been found in that time period. It's this strange device, like he said, that should be impossible. And it wasn't for 1,500 years until the world managed to start producing technology that was at that level. It consisted of at least 30 bronze gears in a wooden container, and it was only the size of a shoebox. The clock mechanism was highly advanced for its time. By turning a hand crank, the user could move forward or backward in time. Not physically, but through this chart. The crank made the gears move and rotate a series of dials and rings on which there are inscriptions and annotations of Greek zodiac signs and Egyptian calendar days. It seems the information to build such a mechanism was lost through time, perhaps because it was a specialty device or expensive to create. Similar astronomical clocks didn't appear in Europe until the 14th century, and since inventions like this do not usually come from nothing, many researchers think that we may find older precursors in an archaeological context someday. So, the Antikythera mechanism was designed to monitor celestial events, seasons, and festivals. And here is a reconstruction of the mechanism. It tracked the lunar calendar, predicted eclipses, and charted the position and phases of the moon. It also tracked the seasons in ancient festivals like the Olympics, and the calendar is based on the time from one full moon to the next, and a special dial allowed the user to also envision the seasons, which would have been useful for agriculture. Since the ancient Babylonians figured out the cycles of the eclipses, the inventor of the Antikythera mechanism included 2 dials that rotate to show both lunar and solar eclipses. But the most sophisticated thing the mechanism did was lunar calculations. It could figure out the moon's period at a given time and model its elliptical orbit. So you could crank this device to like hundreds of years in the future, and it would model what the moon phases would be like and what the eclipses, and the seasons even would be. And no one is sure who used the Antikythera mechanism. It's interesting since it's the only artifact of its kind, which makes me kind of suspect that maybe this was an ancient artifact older than the Greeks or Romans who were using it. And it was perhaps a relic that they were guarding, or was some sort of treasure to them, and that was left behind by some more ancient progenitors. So archaeologists are getting closer to knowing where the Antikythera mechanism was made. The use of Coil in the numerous inscription places the creation of the mechanism in the Greek world, which was geographically large at the time. And there were also festival dials mentions of the Olympics and the Na in northwest Greece, and also the Haliea in the island of Rhodes. There was an analysis of the inscriptions by classicist Alexander Jones and colleagues, which suggested the mechanism could keep track of at least 42 different calendar events. With those dates in mind, Jones and colleagues calculate that the crater of the mechanism was likely based at a 35-degree north latitude. Coupled with Cicero's mention of a similar device at Posidonius school, that means that the island of Rhodes is again the leading contender for the origin of the mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism also told fortunes. So Jones and colleagues' new interpretation of the mechanism is based on the extant 3,400 Greek characters on the device, although thousands more characters are likely missing due to the incomplete nature of the artifact. In their linguistic analysis, these scholars discovered that the mechanism refers to eclipses, color, size, and associated winds. The Greeks believed that the characteristics of an eclipse were related to good and bad omens, and because of this belief, by building in predictive eclipsive technology, the creator of the mechanism was letting the user divine the future.
Interesting.
The mechanism also included hands or pointers for Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, all of which are easily visible in the sky, as well as a rotating ball that showed the phases of the moon. The parts that work these planetary pointers are gone, but text on the front plate of the mechanism confirms that the planetary motion was modeled mathematically using numerous complex gears, and that it was highly accurate.
Yeah, it's so crazy to have like an analog machine to do all that. Because now something like that is just like on the internet, like digital.
He was the first Astro.com.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Mm. And people didn't know what it did for ages, and it's strange that there's only a few of these around. And when you learn about history, you don't learn about these things. It's very relatively new, and
it was obviously like created by an astronomer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
yeah, but there's not even sure.
Someone who studied the stars and also were like quite the engineer or something.
Yeah, the amount of math needed to construct that is just incredible. Yeah, so that was just warming up, because what we come into next is truly ancient and lost. And we'll start our journey with the infamous, mysterious handbag of Sumeria and Mesopotamia.
Are these the handbags on the hieroglyphs?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So they're found all over the world, but there are 1,000-year-old depictions of the Anunnaki, which were the people of the sky, these bringers of knowledge to the Mesopotamian people, and they show these gods, these beings, carrying a mysterious bag. But
do you think the handbag is some kind of technology?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because halfway around the world, we find that same thing depicted in ancient Mesopotamian civilizations and depicted by the ancient Sumerian representations of the Anunnaki. The mysterious handbag of the gods is seen in several cultures in America and Göbekli Tepe. Coincidence? I think not.
I guess it's like, yeah, you have technology that you keep in your hand, right? Like we have our phones. Like now everybody, like everyone has their phone on them all the time, like constantly.
Yeah.
So
I think what's happened is that historians have misrepresented an ancient sort of technology, because why would the gods, these higher beings, all across the world be holding the same thing?
Yeah.
What is it? And it's not in the hands of any normal people, any laymen. It's always in the Anunnaki or the Egyptian, hierarchy of the Netters. It's in Göbekli Tepe with their kind of deities, even in America as well. And we'll start to see photos of those all over the world. And what could those things be? Because these people who are carrying them were said to be the bringers of knowledge. So what were they carrying with them that was so important for all these cultures to depict? So this is a huge and massive puzzle, and slowly we're trying to start to fit the pieces together. And mainstream archaeology has not been able to answer this question. Even the British Museum says that they're fruit baskets or something like that. It's like, why would it's such an important image, like they're not carrying fruit baskets, there's or handbags. It's something more than that.
They do look like your average like middle-aged mum's handbag.
Yeah, but why are beings with wings carrying them? It's not like they're like, oh, let's go down to the bazaar and fill our bag with a bunch of spices and lovely things to carry back to our space temple and go home to our planet. I mean, it could be.
I feel like it could possibly be, like, I don't know, like my first thought was like, oh, maybe they have some kind of like spiritual or powerful materials like crystals and stuff, but then why wouldn't they draw them just with the crystals?
Yeah.
So
well, the ancient Sumerians were kind of the oldest ones, and Göbekli Tepe as well, who depicted the ancient Anunnaki with curious items. Two of the most interesting objects seen in the ancient Sumerian deities were the hand watch, this thing that they wore on their wrist that looked a lot like a watch, and also the mysterious bag. And if we travel thousands of kilometers around the globe from Mesopotamia to the Americas, we will find that the ancient Maya, Aztecs, and other civilizations utilized the same motif when depicting their deities. Furthermore, if we travel to Egypt, we will see that the Ankh symbol was also carried around by the gods, just as the mystery handbag in ancient Mesopotamia and the Americas. So if we
it looks too small for a fruit bag anyway.
It's
like,
tiny, right?
You would keep like an apple in it?
And in the other hand, they're carrying like a pine cone. And the pine cone is often a representation of the pineal gland, of higher knowledge.
Yeah.
So And here on his wrist, I'm not going to zoom in, and it's covered by this.
Isn't that the watch?
Yeah, there's a watch there and a watch there on his wrist. So why are these ancient civilizations in America, Egypt, and Mesopotamia depicting their deities carrying a mysterious object in their hand? Is it possible that all the ancient cultures in America, Egypt, and Mesopotamia were visited by the same beings or gods? Interestingly, the ancient Anunnaki were nearly always represented in a humanoid form, even though numerous traits indicate clear differences between the Anunnaki and ordinary humans. The facial features of the ancient Anunnaki gods were also well hidden thanks to large beards. The Egyptians did the same thing, and the Americas did the same thing as well. So why do these ancient cultures, separated thousands of kilometers from each other, depict their deities in a nearly identical way? Furthermore, how is it even possible that the ancient Sumerians depicted their gods carrying a mysterious bag, and that people halfway across the world did the same thing? At the archaeological site of La Venta, we will find a stone stele depicting the ancient Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl, who is curiously holding in his hand the same bag we see in ancient Sumerian depictions. But it's not only in Mexico where the curious representation is found. If we travel to Tula, an important regional center which reaches heights at the capital of the Toltec Empire between the fall of Teotihuacan and the rise of Tenochtitlan, you will find their massive Atlantean statues, and if we observe closely, we will notice once again that the handbag is present. Then if we travel to Göbekli Tepe, located on a remote hilltop in southern Turkey, we will find the same thing. Handbag once again depicted over the heads of a constellation. So does the presence of the mysterious bag carried by the gods indicate that these two cultures are connected in a mysterious way? How is it even possible that this handbag is present in different civilizations around the globe? And what the hell was it? Why does no one have any answers? So, as we're kind of going to go diving into the ancient technology, I want to kind of propose a theory that this is a lost technology, that this handbag is a misrepresented technology, and that perhaps the bag was a battery of some sort, or perhaps the bag represented knowledge that they were bringing to the people of Earth, a technology for them that would help to rise their civilization to a new height, that they were bringing something for them.
Yeah, maybe some kind of device, like time traveling device.
Who knows? Time traveling cell phone. So
it's so strange. Like it really does. It just irks you, doesn't it?
It irks you that you can't especially find the secret. But let's go into ancient Egypt and some of the ancient cultures, because we always think that battery and electricity was found later in the modern era. But as we kind of explore the past, there's very concrete evidence that the ancient Egyptians, possibly even the Toltecs and the Mayans, even the Sumerians and those at Göbekli Tepe, were using electricity and batteries thousands and thousands of years before the modern man invented it. So let's take a little look into something that is known as the Djed pillar. There will be photos up for everyone here, and I'm just going to quickly show Helki what the Djed pillar is and how it's depicted in ancient Egypt. So the Djed pillar is very common. It's depicted all over ancient Egypt, and it's depicted almost as the size of a human. Big. It's a big object. And not just the size of the human, but size of the these
deities and
deities
gods.
that are using them. And here you can see that this person is bringing something towards the Djed pillar, some sort of objects.
Looks like champagne.
Or possibly some sort of fluid. Now, when you look at these objects, does it kind of remind you of anything? See, here we have a passing over from a deity to a human, the passing of the Djed pillar. It is like they are giving it to these people.
It does remind you of like an electric tower.
So yeah, let's look at what electric lines look like. And hopefully here. So if we zoom right in here, we've got this very similar shape running through here and right here. You see, it's these like transformers, these rings and bands that seem to be generating some sort of electricity. So now I'm going to show you a video, and this is showing actually through scientific proof that the Djed pillar actually produces electrostatic charge, that the Djed pillar is actually a generator of energy. So here we'll come.
As you can see, we have a very interesting phenomenon happening here.
What the hell?
Non-conductive
It is.
materials
And
It's just stone.
generating an incredible amount of
with a charge, and then look, they put a light bulb,
There are no tricks. There's
and
no light.
you can see that there's a flickering of electricity going through the light bulb. See?
And that's
From this
why
electro charge. And here they're doing the same experiments with the Djed pillar. See, it's producing, when they come close to it, it's producing a charge. You can see that charge happening.
And it's just stone.
It's just stone, and what they're doing is passing a current through it. So this is actually, the Djed pillar is working as an amplifier. But not only the Djed pillar, the obelisk, the
How are they going to
pyramids.
send the current through it?
That's what we're going to get into. So how are they sending the currents through this? And a lot of it is through, when we look at the pyramids, is through some sort of hydrostatic charge, mainly through subterranean currents beneath the pyramid. That creates a hydroelectricity, which ends up charging the granite, electrifying the granite, and passing a current through the pyramid. But there's also something more, because the ancients had batteries. And
Maybe
one
that's
of the
the
most
handbag.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think of it, when you think of like a generator that you can carry, it's very boxy in shape and has a handle typically. So one of the most famous ancient batteries is something called the Baghdad battery. And there's a lot of debate around whether the Egyptians actually had access to electricity. But take a look at this image here. What does that look like to you? It's basically a light bulb with a depiction of a snake. But what else is a snake like? It's the coils of electricity, right?
Yeah.
Electricity passing through. And what is holding it up? A Djed pillar right there.
Right.
So I'm just going to go down. Look here again. You've got something coming out, this glass tube, electricity forking through it, a wire coming out, connecting to the base of a Djed pillar, which is holding the thing up. And here is a more modern depiction of what that looks like based on some computer rendering of what they found. So here is very obviously depicted some sort of electrical generator. And here, just like Tesla, remember how Tesla held up those two metal
Yeah.
things in his hand? We have the depiction of some sort of deific creature holding up two metal things above it, and the people are underneath, and these bigger gods are granting them this technology. So the Baghdad battery is also a bit different from this, but it basically had some sort of fluid within it, and batteries just have some sort of liquid inside that generates that electricity. So the question is, like, what were they using this electricity for? And one of the biggest questions regarding the pyramids and these megalithic stone sites is, how did they transport these huge megalithic blocks of stone across the deserts? So there are numerous findings that indicate ancient Egyptians might have had access to advanced technologies. Two of the most prominent pieces of evidence is a wall at the Dendera temple and the enigmatic Baghdad batteries. So this is at the Dendera temple, and it's called the Dendera bulb. We start off taking a look at the enigmatic Baghdad batteries, also referred to as the Parthian batteries. And the items were discovered in the village of Qut Rabo in a modern-day Iraq. These mysterious terracotta pots are 115 millimeters wide to 140 millimeters tall. The batteries remained long forgotten until Wilhelm Koenig, the director of the National Museum of Iraq, found the Baghdad batteries in the museum's collection in 1938. And he was the first among them to speculate these items were in fact batteries. Experiments and models of the Baghdad battery have actually produced electricity. They said it's not a lot of juice, but when you look at it, there was enough power to power something small thousands of years ago. The batteries are unique, and they are a discovery that is one of a kind. If it is something that tells us that the ancient mankind had the technology, that they were not as primitive as we thought.
What could it power?
So it could power a small light source based on the test that they did. But perhaps they weren't using it like the ancients were. We're approaching it with a modern mind, and they actually filled it with a acidic grapefruit juice to power it, which is, I don't think, the right thing to power it. As we'll come into later, I think these ancient sites and these ancient technologies were being powered by mercury, liquid mercury, which is a liquid metal.
Yeah. But how do you know they had access to that? Oh, I guess we heard about that in the levitation episode. We spoke about that a bit.
We're going to get into a bit of the fact that mercury was found at a lot of ancient sites.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. So there was a lot of study, and...
Well, they need to test it with mercury, don't they?
Yeah. When the tube is in operation, the beam is created where the power cord enters the cathode tube at the opposite end, and this is the Dendera bulb. In the image of the temple, the electron beam is represented as an extended snake. The tail of the snake begins where a cable from the power box enters the tube, and the head of the snake touches the opposite end. And in Egyptian art, the serpent was the symbol of divine energy. The Giza power plant. Which brings us to, what were these ancient Egyptians using this electricity for? If we begin to change our perspective on what the Giza pyramids were for, perhaps the entire monument was the first computer chip, motherboard. Ancient Egypt itself was a motherboard. When you look at a computer motherboard, you see all these individual components lined in specific ways. And then when you look at the geographical map of the Giza and all the things around it, it's so similar to what a motherboard looks like. You have the pyramids in a specific alignment. They're aligned to the stars. Beneath the pyramids, you have this subterranean current, which is producing electricity. You have insulative rock on the outside and conductive granite on the inside, as well as you have these Djed pillars, you've got these light bulbs, you've got this Ankh, and so what the hell were these Egyptians using this energy for? And was Giza truly a power plant?
Yeah, like I feel like that is, I don't know, that just makes a lot more sense than these just being built to be tombs.
Yeah.
Like, I think the pyramids definitely could have played a role in like some kind of free energy or wireless energy.
Yeah, so were these ancient people who were carrying the handbags carrying the divine energy, just like the Egyptians said? The serpent was the divine energy. Tesla, even when he was talking about his electricity, harnessing it from the ether, he was always referred to it as the she. It was the divine cosmic energy. And so was perhaps these beings, who knows where they came from, some sort of lost civilization on our world or from beyond in the stars, were they carrying with them the secret to this divine energy? Were they carrying with them the knowledge of electricity? Holding batteries, perhaps.
Yeah. Or something that was picking up on the energy coming up of the pyramids.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we carry a phone that has a signal.
Yeah. Who knows? It does seem, though, that they were handing this off because they were carrying this energy, or, you know, it could have been some sort of like life support system. Who knows what it was? But okay, let's say the ancient Egyptians were using electricity, but what were they using it for? And that brings us to the topic of the megalithic monuments. How are these megalithic monuments made? Scientists do not know how these ancient sites were made so precisely. Let's take away the fact about how they were built, but how the hell did they cut the stones in such precise measurements? Drill holes with stone tools? It's not possible to do. It's just not possible. So archaeologists have no idea how they're doing it. So how did the ancients cut the stone? A theory was put forward by Professor Ivan Watkins, and he stated that the ancient people of the world were able to cut stone by harnessing the power of the sun. Obviously, many do not believe that simple tools were enough to create some of the truly wondrous ancient stone monuments. From Machu Picchu in South America to the Giza Plateau in Egypt, every ancient monument has led us to think and strongly believe that there was some sort of external force responsible for the ancient mega projects, which is also pointing to the ancient alien theory. So, when we look at these ancient sites, the carvings are so precise in such giant pieces of stone, and many do not know how they even produce these facets or angles without using something that could have had some sort of rotatory spinning, like a sander or a grinder. It's not possible to achieve these perfect facets without something similar. They could not have done it just by chiseling with stone tools. So here's a picture of one of the granite sarcophagi in the Serapeum in Saqqara, Egypt. And one thing for sure and for certain is that ancient monuments do show advanced methods of stonework. Some theories believe it wasn't due to the use of electricity and power tools, but a more efficient technology that harnessed natural forces such as the sun, wind, water, or sound. The technology has not been recorded in history, but if natural forces were harnessed, there wouldn't be much evidence recorded in the archaeological record apart from the product of that technology. So what we see is in the form of perfectly drilled granites, intricate diorite vases, and perfectly fit in irregular stone walls. You can't just drill or shape stone in the ways you could wood or metal. So here are some of these precisely cut angles that fit together perfectly like a jigsaw piece. And this is the 12 angled stone which is an archaeological artifact in Cusco, Peru. Here at Karnak, which is a huge temple complex near Luxor in Egypt, we find the drill hole. So especially hard stones like granite or diorite, as they are made from extremely hard interlocking minerals that wear down tools before any real progress can even be made. The ancient stone and metal tools that we are told were used would have very little impact on hard igneous rock. So archaeology is certainly missing something. It takes diamond-tipped tools and lots of cooling fluid to achieve the feats of stone masonry that we see in the distant past. And even now it is a relatively slow and difficult process, which brings us to another theory for how they achieved it, by harnessing the power of sound and tuning fork vibrations. Sonic drilling and acoustic levitation. Acoustic levitation, go check out our levitation episode.
We did a great episode on that.
Yeah.
I feel like we might revisit it one day because we never did it on YouTube.
I know, it was such a good episode.
Audio, sorry.
And we really
had great pictures that we were looking at, so it would be good to revisit.
Yeah. And so how does sonic drilling work? Well, in simple terms, when sound vibrations of a specific frequency are sent through a drill bit, or even through something as simple as a metal pipe, it can vibrate in such a way to act like a high-frequency jackhammer. The drill barely needs to turn, as the vibrational impact and shattering does the job compared to conventional drilling. The method is actually faster, and thus less wear on the tool bit takes less energy. Conceivably, you can even turn the handle of a large tuning fork into a cutting rod, whether it's a drilled tube or drill bits. Even a copper tube could conceivably cut into granites using this method.
Why don't they still do that then?
There is something called sonic drilling now.
Okay.
Yeah. And people use sonic drilling nowadays. So to turn a tuning fork into a sonic drill, the resonant frequency of the cutting rod must match the frequency of the fork that it is attached to. Scientifically, the way it works is the transverse vibrations from the fork prongs, known as tines, move the bottom of the U shape up and down, which sends long eternal vibrations through the cutting rod up the rod's resonant frequency. These vibrations create standing waves with maximum vibrations at the beginning and end of the rod, and there's a point of no vibration in the middle where a handle could be attached. For example, tines 30 centimeters long and 3 centimeters thick make a resonant frequency of 1,100 hertz, and a 1.5 meter long rod would be required to allow cutting. In Egyptian mythology, the falcon god Horus is associated with harpoons, they say, but maybe the clearest evidence for sonic drilling has been staring us in the face for millennia, because they always hold these sorts of rods in their hands.
Yeah.
They hold the scepters and these forks. One common symbol or object that is often seen in ancient Egypt art is the scepter. It appears in relics and hieroglyphics, and it could perhaps be that maybe this is actually a cutting implement. So here we have some of the three most important symbols, and what is in the center of them? The Djed pillar.
Yeah.
We have the Ankh, the Djed pillar, and a scepter with a tuning fork U-bend at the end. So archaeologists have talked about like symbols for what this means. They say the scepter was a symbol of power and dominion, although it has a number of other mythological and symbolic associations, and that perhaps the true meaning got lost through the dynastic history of ancient Egypt, that perhaps these were built long, long ago than the historians are saying. And just like how all knowledge gets corrupted, even in ancient Egypt, the priests became so powerful and corrupt that they started selling these idols. And they said, if you buy these idols, it will help you to get a good place in the afterlife. Everything was beginning to corrupt over time, but perhaps there was a true deeper meaning to these symbols. And we've already looked at the Djed pillar, and now we're starting to look at the science of tuning forks, and possibly that these three tools were used to create.
How would they use the Ankh?
The Ankh is still up in the air in terms of how it was used, but it could have been some sort of...
It does look like it could be used for something like that.
Yeah, but when we think about actually a Tesla coil has these coils wrapped around one another, and it comes back in itself on a loop, and it's very similar to the Ankh shape when a Tesla coil is arcing its energy through itself. So it could possibly be that the Ankh was some sort of regulator, some sort of energy producer, because it's often also seen in the hands of the deities and it's often depicted coming from above down towards the nose. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, so it is clear that these methods certainly did not create the boreholes when you look at the holes that do not go all the way through the granite. The circumference of the circular hole has a deeper groove, implying it was created with a metal pipe, and it wouldn't be possible to cut into granite simply using a metal pipe. And when we're referring to this, we're referring to this image here. As you can see, there's a deeper groove in it, right? In this part, it's like there was some sort of tubular shape that was being pressed in at a high force, and it kind of stopped there. But you can see the outlines of this tube, and it was obviously hollow because it cut in and around this chunk. But it seems almost that they were using some sort of sonic drilling to drill into the stone, and perhaps the stone was coming out through the back of the tube.
Yeah.
So the oldest depiction of rock drill is a hieroglyph known as U24, first seen in the 3rd Dynasty tomb. And this hieroglyph is actually depicting a tuning fork tool, not a depiction of a traditional hand crank rock drill as we are told. So here we have it, a very similar looking image to a tuning fork, except this is slightly different because there's these lines running through it. There is
like currents, no?
Either
like
currents or strings or
like
wires of some sort.
Yeah, like an electric line.
Yeah, exactly. So officially, tuning forks were invented in 1711 by John Shore. But it's actually, now that we're looking into history, it's possible that their existence traces back to ancient Celtic and Egyptian times, because it's not only in Egypt that these tuning forks are found. Nowadays, the tuning forks are mainly used to test hearing, tuning musical instruments, and keeping time in a quartz watch. But what did the ancients use them for? And what we're kind of trying to show is that they were used to cut, drill, and levitate stones. So here is an ancient depiction on a Celtic stone. What you have here is the tuning fork and the hammer used to strike the tuning fork, because you normally need a mallet of some sort. And what we're clearly seeing is a tuning fork and hammer. And if they're drawn to scale, then the tuning fork is quite large. If you imagine that they're trying to levitate stones or cut through large things, it could be that these tuning forks were huge. And when we see in the hieroglyphs as well, the Djed pillar was big, really big. It was the size of the deities who were handing it over, as well as those scepters and tuning forks. They could be really long as well. The fork was likely made of bronze, just as bells are made of bronze, due to the ideal stiffness and resilience of the material, allowing for prolonged vibrations. Other materials like stone, iron, copper, and wood are unsuitable. To the right of the fork is what looks like an anvil, axe head, or horn. And to me, that looks a lot like an anvil of some sort. But horns have acoustic applications. A horn loudspeaker is a complete loudspeaker or loudspeaker element which uses a horn to increase the overall efficiency of the driving element, typically a diaphragm driven by an electromagnet. The horn itself is a passive component, does not amplify the sound from the driving element as such, but rather improves the coupling efficiency between the speaker, driver, and the air. The horn can be thought of as an acoustic transformer that provides impedance matching between the relatively dense diaphragm material of the air of low density, and the result is a greater acoustic output from a given driver. So if we read the works of Phil Callahan, you'll know that there were these towers, round stone towers, and they were made of a highly diagmatic stone. The inner floor is made of dirt and raised off the ground at varying levels, and the Callahan theory was that it allowed fine-tuning of the resonant frequency inside the tower by varying the height of the inner space. So if we look at how tuning forks affect liquid vibrations, you can see here in the water and liquid some of the cymatic effects, that it's definitely affecting the world around it. So can we scale it up on such a big scale so that it can actually manipulate and move matter? Here again, you see two tuning forks joined to each other by strings. The left fork is joined at 2 vibrational nodes, the right at 3, possibly implying a 2 to 3 frequency ratio between the two forks, which is the musical interval known as a perfect fifth, aka the power chord for you metalheads. Beneath them is a 4-shaped leaf pattern, reminiscent once again of a flower or a 4-leaf clover, then a dish or convex lens, and further down on the left, the same anvil or bullhorn flare shape. Boom, here as well. So what are the chances that an old Pictish stone in Scotland would show several of the same symbols as a carving from ancient Egypt? Both show tuning forks, flower shape, flare shape, and possible liquid association. A cymatic swirl, the other dish that could hold a liquid. So some years ago, an American friend picked the lock of a door leading to an Egyptian museum storeroom measuring approximately 8 feet by 10 feet. Inside, she found hundreds of what she described as tuning forks. These ranged in size, this is cool, from approximately 8 inches to approximately 8 or 9 feet. So they got huge.
Yeah.
And when we think of our levitation episode in Tibet, they didn't use tuning forks, but they had horns that also varied in length.
Yeah.
You know, some becoming really long.
But why were all these tuning forks all in one room?
Because it was in some sort of ancient Egyptian museum. So it's perhaps that they were hidden away because they didn't want to be shown. So basically, she went in and these objects resembled a letter U with a handle, a bit like a pitchfork. And when the wire was plucked, so these tuning forks had wires coming between them, just like in the hieroglyphic picture. And when the wire was plucked, they vibrated for a prolonged period. It occurs to me to wonder if these devices might have hardened tool bits attached to the bottom of their handle, and if they might have been used for cutting or engraving stone once they had been set vibrating.
Yeah, like that could be how they made all these hieroglyphs, like the little ones.
Yeah.
Right? Because some of them are so intricate and you can carved into the stone. And it would be hard to, like, you know, do so many. There were so many, you know, like with banging the little hammer. Yeah.
And you can see over the dynasties, there's these incredibly precise things, and then you can tell there's these hieroglyphs that almost look like children's drawings on those things. But then right nearby is like a really expertly done hieroglyph.
Some can be really small as well, and that would be really difficult. It makes sense if you had like this little like vibrating rod that you could just run along and it would carve.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Mm.
So there in that picture we have the strings and tuning forks, and strings strung this way between forks or between the tines of a fork, as on a harp, piano, or guitar, can be tightened to the exact same pitch as the tuning fork, and thus by bowing or plucking them, the fork can be set to vibrate without the need for a hammer blow. The feature is likewise never seen in modern commercial tuning forks. Between the string would be ideal, as it would make for a steady vibration, just as a violin can be bowed to make an extended note. And the largest forks were 8 to 9 feet long, indicated that some seriously low pitches and or powerful and prolonged sounds were required. Whereas tuning forks now can be vibrated through electronic drivers that use a pulsating magnetic field to set the tines in motion. In ancient times, simple striking, bowing, and plucking did the job equally well. But was it perhaps that they were using, because in modern day, they're vibrated through electronic drivers that use a pulsating magnetic field. But since we were looking at those batteries, was it possible that they were actually generating some sort of electricity to pulsate a magnetic field to resonate those tuning forks?
Possibly.
So yeah, that comes on to sonic drilling. And yeah, so sonic drilling is, we kind of went into it a little bit, but there's a lot of science in it. And they use sonic drilling today.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just going to skip through the science of this section and through the stone levitation, because if you guys want to hear more about the stone levitation, then definitely check out our episode on levitation. And it kind of, so piezoelectrostatic charge is what is being used in the pyramids. So it could be that when a stone vibrates at its resonant frequency, a standing wave of compression/expansion sets up within it. And what makes stones unique is that they are piezoelectric, meaning they convert pressure into electricity. So
makes sense.
Yeah, so were these, sonic vibrations being used to create pressure, which the stone would then transform into electricity? It's a big question.
Or the ether, like Tesla was talking about.
So imagine that you hit a large tuning fork with a hammer. Apply the bottom of its handle to the side of a stone. The stone vibrates in sympathy. Even when you put it to your skin, you can feel that vibration coming through. And the standing waves arise within the stone, and those standing waves turn into electromagnetic or gravitational waves. How gravitational waves are produced this way is implied through the electromagnetic thing that we just talked about in Tesla's.
Yeah.
In the Nikola Tesla episode that will be going up, that's gone up last week.
The gravity episode from last week, yeah.
Yeah. So when gravitational potential waves are made to be standing waves, you have a stable gravitational node or antinode at the center of the stone, essentially an artificial vibrating center of gravity. That alone may affect the stone's weight. So it may be possible that they didn't completely reduce the gravity of the stone, but made it a lot lighter to be able to be carried, pushed, or directed using these sonic frequencies. And of course, there was a man who, what was his name? His name was Leedskalnin, Edward Leedskalnin, and he single-handedly built his rock park in Florida, lifting huge stones, and even was able to move and pack up his entire 10-mile stone park by himself.
I remember this guy, but he wouldn't let anyone else in,
No,
right?
he wouldn't let anyone know, but here we have this strange, it looks like wood,
Yeah.
but there's a string running through it, and it's kind of in the shape of a tuning fork. Who knows how he actually did it, but he was able to do it all on his own. And that's just that stone again. So let's say, so now we kind of have, a method for how they cut the stone, how they moved the stone, that potentially they had some sort of energy generator through the Djed pillar, through sonic vibrations, and possibly through the Ankh. We also know that through this video here, we have that the obelisks could also generate electricity.
Yeah.
They could light a light bulb,
Yeah.
So if we had some sort of electrical charge going, that these obelisks would charge and produce some sort of frequency. It's interesting to note that there are obelisks have been moved from Egypt. There's one in London, which is one of the financial capitals of the world. There's an Egyptian obelisk in front of Washington, and several that have been moved into very important areas. Could it be that the government knows something about these obelisks? Who knows? But I don't think obelisks were mere monuments. I think they were part of this motherboard in ancient Egypt, part of the grid. So, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that before we move on? Sorry, I've just been really talking to try and fit everything in.
No, a lot of it makes sense. Like, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. God, okay, so I think I'm going to go very quickly over the liquid mercury.
Yeah, because we did definitely cover that in the levitation episode a little. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I have to mention it for the next thing. And then the next thing is the final thing. So, what are liquid mercury pools doing underneath ancient pyramids? And liquid mercury is used. Was it used in batteries and thermometers and things like that? I know it was for a while, and then it was like mercury.
It was used for a lot of bad things.
Then mercury was too poisonous to continue being used. But liquid mercury has been discovered at various Mesoamerican sites, and one of them I visited personally was the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and I remember this temple, which is in Teotihuacan, and there were many fascinating artifacts beneath the pyramid. It was also called the Pyramid of Dreams. But you had metal spheres, hundreds of mysterious metal spheres beneath it, green stone crocodiles, teeth in human figurines, fragments of human skin, skeletons of large jaguar, jewelry pointed, arranged, likely as offerings to the gods. But also in the tunnel's chamber was a mountainous landscape that had been crafted with large pools of liquid mercury, representing lakes and mineral powders and pyrite, making it look like a landscape under the stars. So was it possible that they were creating some sort of circuitry with liquid metal beneath the pyramid? And if these pyramids were used as generators of energy, then perhaps this liquid mercury was used to conduct something, to connect the circuits. The liquid mercury has been found in other areas within Guatemala, Honduras, and they've been found at Lake Amatitilan in Guatemala, Guatemalan tombs, but who knows what are tombs, considering they think the pyramids are tombs. All over in different sites. And not only in Mesoamerica, but there was Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang, and located in the Shanxi province of China. And even though it hasn't been fully excavated, there is replicated in miniature and 100 lakes, rivers, and oceans represented by liquid mercury on the floor, kept flowing by mechanical pumps. So very, very crazy. So mercury is incredibly rare as well. So why, it had to have some sort of function or purpose. It was very rare, but they had vast amounts of it in these. So liquid mercury's reflective nature may have been appealing because Mesoamericans believed that mirrors and reflective surfaces could function as portals into the future and as a river that carries us after death. But I don't think that's just one of the mainstream archaeological theories. But my theory is that it was used as aircraft technology.
Did you come up with this theory?
No. But this is the one I believe.
All right.
So it has been suggested that liquid mercury may actually have served a practical purpose to these ancient peoples. Believers in the ancient astronaut theory point to ancient texts that describe liquid mercury being used to power flying machines. An early 20th century text makes the claim that the Vimanas, we're about to go into the Vimanas, and these were an ancient Indian creation mentioned in Sanskrit epics, particularly the Samarangana Suttadhara from the 11th century, were actually flying machines powered by mercury vortex technology, the power latent in heated mercury. And there were some actual studies done with mercury. And when the mercury was channeled into a toroidal field, they were able to lessen the weight of an object. And that's modern day studies. So now we're going to get into the coolest ancient technology, in my opinion. And that is the technology of the ancient Indian space temples. Flying temples.
Yeah, because I remember the old Indian, like a lot of the artwork on, they have spaceships in them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these flying
They're
craft,
like the Vedic scripts. Yeah.
are called Vimanas. So here I have some photos. This is a digital recreation of a Vimana. Here are some of the pictures of these craft. So, the Hindu ancient texts and Vedas are full of amazing stories about different gods, their extraordinary powers, and battles that took place many centuries ago. Their sagas are perceived as mythological stories, but these myths describe gods who fight against forces on flying crafts. These were originally known as Ratha, before being more commonly referred to as Vimana, meaning traversing or measured out. Vimanas are flying chariots or even flying palaces mentioned in Sanskrit epics and Hindu texts. And before we go further, let's think about the chariots of the gods. You know, the ancient Sumerians described these giant chariots in the sky, that heaven was actually a place that they could see, and it would travel across the earth, and that heaven was this flying object. And when we looked at the old text, the Nephilim, the seraphim, the cherubim, these were all things to describe the moving of God's chariot. And we see, even when we think about Noah's Ark, it could be that Noah's Ark was something that flew because it landed on the top of a bloody mountain, you know?
Yeah.
How did it get there? So these flying chariots are mentioned in a lot of different texts, and similar to the chariots of ancient biblical texts, these aircraft came in different sizes and various shapes that could travel at several speeds to different distances. Some of them were seafaring and land vehicles, whilst others even flew to the moon or further. Most flying saucers come from authentic ancient Indian texts, of which many are ancient epics themselves. Most of these texts have not been translated into the English language. So from most of it, we get the Vimanas in the Vedas, which are an ancient Indian text. And there is this elephant Vimana with numerous engines, and Agnihotra Vimana with 2 engines, and many other types named after animals or birds. In the Rig Veda, which is part of the Vedic text, it refers to the flying machines known as Ratha. The Yajurveda, another part of Vedic text, also contains the name Vimana. These Vimanas are consistently described as weapons of war. The Asvins, the Atlanteans in the Indian text show that they were more technologically advanced than the Indian people. The Atlantean Valixi are described as flying machines having cigar-like shape and had the ability to maneuver both underwater and in outer space. In the text of the Yantra Sarvasva, an ancient text, an ancient guide to these machines, sage Maharishi Bhardwaj tells about 3 classes of Vimana based on their range. Some Vimanas were made to travel locally from one place to another. In the second class, the Vimanas were used to travel to different countries. And in the third class, these flying machines were used to travel to various planets. These Vimanas were non-combustible, unbreakable, and also invisible to the enemies. Mm-hmm. They were just as effective on the offensive. So these flying machines are actually they're not vague. They're described in like a lot of detail as circular aircraft with portholes over 2 decks and a dome. A Vimana is described as flying with the wind's speed and producing a melodious sound as it moves through the sky. It
reminds me a lot of last week's episode when we were talking about the spaceships that, you know, how when you walk under them, they're like can be invisible. They're like round, saucer-like shaped. Like it could have been tapping into that same technology if they're going around space and things.
Yeah.
So.
And this next part is so cool because they're not only describing what the Vimanas look like, but they also describe detailed how to pilot these crafts, and that's really cool. So in the Pushpaka Vimana brought by Ravana, the demon king, in the Hindu epic Ramayana, is the first Vimana in the Hindu text. It is described as resembling the sun. The Vimana moved at the will of the pilot, and when Rama, the protagonist of the text, got in, the chariot followed the king's command and flew to a higher altitude. The Vimana was made by Lord Vishwakarma for the Hindu creation god Brahma. Later on, Brahma presented it to Kubera, or the wealth god, before it was stolen by his half-brother. The Mahabharata, other Hindu epic, provides even more detail on a Vimana. The ancient Indian king Salva acquired the flying machine from Maya Danava, who was a resident of a planetary system named Taltala. The Vimana flew in the sky, rested on the hill, and floated on the water. The craft was called Saubha and could go anywhere, and Salva used it to kill several valiant Vrishni, which were ancient Yadu dynasty heroes. The aircraft of Salva is described as being able to become invisible, which wrong-footed the Yadu dynasty warriors, and another Vimana is described in the Dronaparva, which is a part of the Mahabharata. Here it has a sphere-like shape and was created on the winds produced by the planet Mercury. The epic describes that Bhima, who flew in this Vimana, generated an enormous ray like the sun and created noise like a storm thunder. When we talk about the biblical text, God appeared in the storm, thunder, and he appeared on his chariot, you know. And so here's like, how did they work? So this is cool about how they worked. So here is a drawing based on the description. And here it looks like some Djed pillars. And so this is cool. The pilot should have the training in Tantrika, Mantrika, Kritika, Antarkaloka, Adrishya, and Drishya. So let's just go over a bit of these terms. Tantrika is the generation of the Kundalini energy within the body. It is being able to use that energy to pass through the body. So you are the control module. You using these ancient practices, you can use your will. Mantrika, that's related to sound. Mantra, which is the speaking of the holy sound. So you could use your internal electronics and the vibration of sound to control this. Adrishya and Drishya is how to be seen and unseen. So these were called yogic powers. You could apparently become visible and invisible if you had developed a certain amount of power. And yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff, but it's like how to be quick, how to paralyze, and so on. So take the instructions relating to Gudha, for example. To fly the flying machine from enemies, the pilot is instructed to harness the power in the 8th atmosphere layer above the earth and to attract dark solar rays. Drishya tells the secret of collisions between wind and electricity in the atmosphere and the resultant glow mirrored in front of the Vimana. This creates a Maya Vimana or a camouflaged Vimana. And so basically what they're talking about is creating some sort of magnetic aura that makes it invisible. And when we think of modern UFOs, that's what we see.
Yeah.
The text goes into considerable detail as the metal constructions of Vimanas, their use of mirrors and lenses, and the defenses offered by several Vimana types. And yeah, so there's a lot about like the weaponry and a bunch of different history on that. But basically, the Indian texts are extremely precise on detail. And
when did this like information show up in the Indian texts?
So the Vedas.
Was it a part of the original text? Because I think it's like over 5,000 years.
It was in the original text. And
these, and I think, seems like really out there stuff.
Super out there.
Something written over 5,000 years
ago. It's like to think like about spacecraft. Flying,
but how simple apparently life actually was then.
Because this was
technology.
3,000 BC the Vedas are dated to.
Yeah.
So that's 5,000 years ago that they came. And to think about like that is some crazy sci-fi. If they're for that time that they're writing that, if that's fictional, whoever the hell came up with that. I wouldn't be surprised
if that was like written in the last like 30, 50 years. But if it was like a part of the original text, it just seems completely crazy.
But there's liquid mercury found under some of these temples in India. Yeah. And that they have links to mercury in their texts. They're powered, they have very similar things to what we're talking about today, and these were written 5,000 years ago. So, it really seems like a stretch to feel like these 5,000-year-old Indians were already talking about flying
out into space and stuff, because that's very rare. Like we can sort of guess at that idea, but like to actually have it like spelled out like that.
And they were
in the text, it's crazy.
They did say that it was actually other beings who were piloting these, and that the Indians at the time were separate from the beings who were creating and piloting these. These were the chariots of the gods, the other beings. And only, I think in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna gets into one of the chariots that is being driven by Krishna, and Krishna reveals the truth of the universe to him, and he is so terrified that he says, please stop, like it's too much. And it's always depicted maybe like a chariot like with horses, but could it have been that Arjuna the archer was taken onto one of these craft and shown things that he was not ready for?
And were they gods, or could they have been aliens?
Aliens, or some sort of advanced civilization that came out of some lost period of time. But so that is the end of our ancient technology episode. And just to wrap it all up, perhaps, especially with the beings with the handbags and everything, that they were found in so many different cultures around the world, was some sort of advanced race of beings coming to us and delivering us technology that ended up building the ancient world that we know today, because we cannot explain it through modern means, and were they using some sort of, sound magic, sound science, and electricity using, the Baghdad battery, that bulb that we showed, the Djed pillars, all those things, and were perhaps some of the pyramids and temples that might still be around today, did they once fly in the sky?
Yeah, like there obviously is some connection to ancient technology in these hieroglyphs, because like what we've seen, they've tested things like the Djed pillar, and yeah, I'm convinced. But I was always quite convinced. Was it Tesla who I think originally came out with that?
He studied the
pyramid idea.
Them,
yeah, like the pyramid being, some kind of wireless energy conductor.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've always felt like that resonates so much more with me than these being, rich people's burial places.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good cover up, and also could even be because when civilization fell and we lost this knowledge, these places have been left, right? And it could be just those cultures that were rebuilding, claiming these buildings as sacred tomb spaces because, just because they didn't have they didn't have the knowledge. It could have come from way before the people who were there being buried in them.
Yeah.
Or it could be a cover up. Who knows?
There's always a cover up.
Yeah. But I love the Indian thing at the end there. That was fun. And I always did wonder about those spaceships. And I when I used to be quite into Vedic astrology, and I would look into a lot of stuff from the Vedas and the Indian culture, and I always wondered why do they have these old art and drawings and stuff with spaceships. That was interesting.
Yeah, I came to the Vimanas just in my research, but I have a friend just a month ago, and he was generating all these blueprints and AI generated art for the Vimana. He had become obsessed with them, so I might take some of his photos and put them up here, because those are AI generated, and he got trying to get the blueprints and stuff like that, but I'll also show some of the original depictions of that too.
Yes, awesome. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well done, Lara.
Thank you. So, you want to take us out? You took us in, you want to take us out?
Thanks for watching, guys. We really appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
You don't have to list them every time.
Wow. I'm just saying, we have a whole backlog.
Yeah.
So if you are watching on YouTube, there's tons more episodes on those.
Yeah, and I link them.
Apple, iTunes, and Spotify.
Forgot Google.
And Google. But yeah, definitely leave your comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. That's it. Goodbye. We're out.
We're out. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time for another awesome episode.